The first two successful settlements in the New World, Jamestown and Plymouth, tend to be the two historians focus on quite a bit. The historical interpretation of these two settlements is significant to understanding the future success of the 13 colonies in the United States. This video will address Jamestown. Jamestown, located south of present-day Chesapeake Bay and in eastern Virginia, was swampy, hot, humid, and full of mosquitoes. But it also had plenty of fish, game, berries, and nuts. In other words, it had plenty of food resources. And it was the first successful British colony in North America, founded in 1607 by a group of settlers associated with the Virginia Company, a joint stock company, which is a company whose stock is owned jointly by the shareholders. It was a forerunner of the modern corporation that was organized for undertakings requiring large amounts of capital. Money was raised by selling shares to investors who became partners in the venture. The settlers included company officials or representatives, as well as indentured servants, some of whom were of nobility and/or former soldiers in the military, who sold the future fruit of their labor in exchange for passage to the New World. Most, if not all of the settlers in the early years, were exclusively men. One of the first acts of Captain John Smith and the other settlers was to erect a wooden cross on the shore at Cape Henry. It was at the foot of this cross that Reverend Robert Hunt led the 149 men of the Virginia Company in public prayer, thanking God for their safe journey and recommitting themselves to God's plan and purpose for this new world. The Virginia Charter of 1606 reveals that part of their reason for coming to America was to propagate the Christian religion to such people as yet live in darkness and miserable ignorance of the true knowledge and worship of God. Although it is clear that evangelism played a part in the settlement's purpose, in fact, every settlement, every colony's charter included spreading the gospel as a reason for its existence. Jamestown's primary concern was economic. As a joint stock venture, it desired and needed to make a profit. Although Jamestown had a mostly favorable geographical location, the early years were a struggle, a nightmare. Instead of working to grow and gather food, colonists were searching for gold or playing games. Spanish accounts that told of easily acquired riches, such as gold, and docile passive natives who could be compelled to work, played a role in the early settlers' laziness, so to speak. English customs, culture, and law for the past century or two, which discouraged production and hard work, also helped to shape the lack of desire to work on behalf of the colonists. Because of this laziness, John Smith, one of the settlement's early leaders, established the rule, "He who does not work does not eat," which comes from 2 Thessalonians 3 verse 10. In other words, John Smith had to rule with an iron fist and force people to work and use draconian punishments for laziness. Despite this effort, the people still struggled mightily. In addition to their struggle to simply survive, the settlers had to contend with local natives who, not pleased with starving settlers stealing from them, were a constant threat. Clashes between the two groups at times led to death. A shaky peace was established when Pocahontas saved and abducted John Smith from being killed by her father, Chief Powhatan, and leader of the Powhatan Confederacy. When John Smith leaves, the settlement experiences what is known as the Starving Time, from 1609 to 1610, a time when their constant struggle became much worse, as only 60 or so people out of 500 or 600, depending on your sources, were still alive by the spring of 1610. Colonists, in order to survive, began eating rats, cats, dogs, the bark off of trees. Some even dug up corpses and ate them, while one man committed an unspeakable act. He assaulted and killed his wife and used her for sustenance. He was executed for this evil act. What's really mysterious is that the whole area was full of fish, game, berries, and nuts. It's hard to imagine that they struggled as much as they did. To make matters even worse during the starving time, the young settlement suffered an Indian attack in 1609 that resulted in the killing of John Ratcliffe, Jamestown's council president, which led Lord de la Warr, the new leader of Jamestown, to undertake aggressive military action against the Indians. After several years of struggling, the Virginia Company sent over Sir Thomas Dale in 1611. He served as High Marshal, During his stay, he believed he found the reason for Jamestown's constant struggle. None of the laborers owned anything. They did not own the fruit of their labor, which created an incentive to shirk, to be lazy. In an attempt to change this, he assigned plots of land to individuals and instituted property rights. Now, instead of everything being owned and controlled by the Virginia Company, individual settlers privately owned land and were able to keep the fruit of their labor once they met the company's required quota. The result? The colony began to improve. Another key person in the history of Jamestown was John Rolfe. His discovery that tobacco grew well in the Chesapeake led to Virginia's first cash crop, helping to make the colony profitable. Many history textbooks credit tobacco with saving Jamestown. Later, we're going to look into that claim to see to what extent it is true. John Rolfe also married Pocahontas, Chief Powhatan's daughter. Through this marriage, Pocahontas was able to help maintain a shaky peace between the English settlers and the native people. Another key date in Virginia's history is 1619. In that year, three significant developments occur. First, the House of Burgesses was established. This was the first representative assembly in America. It began in a church in Jamestown with the Reverend Buck leading the Burgesses in prayer that God would guide and sanctify their proceedings to his own glory and the good of the plantation. They issued laws requiring church attendance, believing that men's affairs cannot prosper where God's service is neglected. This representative body was the first to observe an American Day of Thanksgiving as well. Second, in 1619, now that Jamestown has been prospering, men desired to have families. The problem? There were hardly any women. And so, the Virginia Company, after vetting women in England to make sure they were wholesome ladies, sent a shipload of them to Jamestown. And third, the first Africans were brought to British North America in 1619 on a Dutch warship. They were sold to Jamestown settlers and treated as indentured servants. They were not slaves. After their years of indentured servitude were complete, they received their own land and tools with which to work that land. They were citizens of Jamestown, equal with others. The origins of slavery will be addressed a little later in another video. Finally, Virginia's early relationship with Native Americans. Well, John Rolfe's marriage to Pocahontas established a shaky peace for most of the 16 teens. Indians helped with food. Indians did look down upon the settlers for their inability to survive. Colonists stole from Indians from time to time, especially during the starving years. Both colonists and Indians killed each other. But to get a better sense of what the relationship was like, read the primary account, The Great Indian Uprising of 1622.